Okay, I'm driving south again. Don't know how many videos I'll make or how long this will be, or even what the topic will be. I haven't got a topic yet. It might be to do with the sunshine. So I've got my sunglasses on right now because it's an absolutely fantastic morning here. And what time is it? It's just after 6. But on the M6 driving south, obviously this, well, maybe it's not that obvious, but the sun comes up right over the motorway ahead. It's okay, this bit I'm on right now, but it comes up right and just drives straight into the sun, and all you can do with this visor is just do this. I'm always, I don't know, in danger of crashing. So I've got my sunglasses on to try to minimise the effects of the sunshine. But it is gorgeous, you know, I'm looking out over fields here, and it's quite flat where I am, and it's just like a really low-lying mist, you know. It's just absolutely magical mystery tour I'm on here. So yeah, I should mention that actually on my last Southbound video, the one I made last week, somebody commented, who the hell was it? Biodegradebleman? I don't know who Biodegradebleman is, but I think it was yourself, I don't know, Biodegradebleman, I think it was yourself, commenting, actually, was it on that video, or were you commenting about me on somebody else? Anyway, you were saying something about how I'm coming up with kind of mystical, magical nonsense. I don't know how I'm doing that. Am I really doing that? If I'm doing that, let me know specifically, because I don't want to slip into mysticism by mistake. I don't mind doing it deliberately, but I don't want to accidentally drop bollocks any more than I already do. Actually, it's a bit funny that, because I think I did read it on somebody else. Maybe it was on one of Gary's videos. I read this comment, and it was a comment exchange between Biodegradebleman and somebody else. You know, Fred's done this, and Fred's got a bit funny. I'm really disappointed in Fred. It was that kind of a comment. And I left her a comment response, which she hasn't responded to. You haven't responded to, Biodegradebleman, saying "fuck your disappointment." So I just think it's a bit weird that. I mean, I don't know, I guess we just haven't sorted out the protocols, the etiquette of these comment exchanges yet. But when I read a comment about me that refers to me in the third person like that, you know, Fred did this, Fred did that, I just think, stop fucking talking about me, you cunt. You're going to talk about me, talk to me. You know, that's what goes through my mind, you know what I mean? And you just sounded like this Biodegradebleman comment, and you might be a really nice bloke, BDM, but I got to tell you, when I looked at that comment, I thought this just sounds like an old woman wittering about the misgivings she has of the younger generation. Oh, I'm so disappointed in the youth of today. The youth of today, they're all wearing those hoodies. They're all smoking the ganja. You know, that kind of feel to it. I'm so disappointed in that Fred. He appears to be intelligent, but fuck you, and the horse you rode in on. Anyway, I don't know what this is about. It won't be. I don't think it'll all be an hour-long rant about Biodegradebleman, because I don't know you personally. So yeah, I'm sure you're doing your best. We're all doing our best. That's my philosophy. We're all doing our best. The van ahead of me here, I'm just north of Birmingham. The van ahead of me has got an advert on the back, and it's got 2 bottles of Lambrini white, Lambrini red. It says, "Girls just want to have fun. Lambrini, best served chilled." Wow. Lambrini is like really cheap, nasty pseudo wine, I guess you would call it. Yeah, girls just wanna have fun. I was in the kitchen yesterday. One of my lads came in, and he'd been doing something upstairs on his computer, and apparently what he'd done is he'd accidentally deleted his iTunes library. It's all his song collection, about 2,000 songs. And not only had he deleted them, he'd also emptied the wastebasket, so he'd lost them all, he said. And he said, well, it's alright though, because I've got a program that will recover them for me. And I know, you know, that's fine. And he paid 30 quid for it, he said. He paid 30 quid for it. And it was, presumably it was working. And like a twit, I said, oh, you didn't need to pay 30 quid for it, you can get them for nothing. You know, because you can just download those kind of recovery programs, can't you? And he said, can you? And I said, yeah. He said, oh, well, it's only 30 quid. And being a dad and a twat, I said, Oh well, 30 quid, I'll make that 30 quid come alive for you. That's about 6 hours work, because he has this part-time job in Maplin, selling, you know, electronic products, as a sales assistant. And I said it's about 6 hours work at Maplin's now. And he didn't say anything or make any kind of overt move, but I could just see his face just fall a few millimeters, you know, where that kind of realization hit him, you know, that because he'd spent this 30 quid on this program and hadn't done the research, hadn't talked to somebody about it first, that he'd have to, that effectively he's just worked 6 hours in a job that's a bit boring for nothing. You know, if I could have my time again, I wouldn't say that. I just wouldn't say that, because I just, shit, you know what I mean? I hate that feeling, because I remember that feeling when I was a kid myself, and now sometimes, you know what I mean? Where you realise you've done something stupid and you just feel yourself sink a wee bit, you know? Just sink a little bit, and I just, the fact that I induced that feeling in my lad, it was, well, it's too bloody late now, isn't it? I guess he'll learn. I mean, the only way I can deal with that kind of thing, you know, having that effect, is to be this, is to try to think of myself into this role of this kind of northern dad. Northern dad. There used to be an advert on television years ago, actually, for oh god, what was it for? It was for the little things in life. It was for an advert for like a, I don't know if it's a credit card or some kind of financial system or sort of loans. I can't remember what it was for now. But it featured this this lad talking to his dad, and clearly this lad wanted a racing bike for Christmas, and his dad, who was terribly northern and kind of bluff, says, "Oh, maybe next year, son." And then Christmas morning rolls around, and you see from the point of view shot from the top window of a terraced house somewhere in the north of England, you see a kid pushing this racing bike out of the door, and it cuts to northern dad looking out the window down at his son, kind of doing this. "I was right about that saddle though," because it's got like a racing saddle on it. "I was right about that saddle." You know, no recognition of the emotional contact that's actually going on there. Anyway, yeah, that's my model sometimes. You know, when I find myself making stupid decisions, or when I want to come across as authoritative and manly, but I don't want to, I don't know. Yeah, northern dad. That's me. Up until relatively recently, I was still working in education, but up until relatively recently, I was doing quite a lot of management kind of work, not at an elevated level. You know, it's kind of course leadership, program management, that kind of thing, as well as teaching. And I recently stepped off that ladder. And you know, some parts of it I was good at, some parts of it I wasn't so good at, and for a variety of reasons, as I say, I decided to step into the void, leap into the void off the ladder. So now I'm just doing teaching and other kinds of stuff, which I'm really enjoying actually. But I thought what I'd try to do is I just spent a few minutes just thinking about, you know, what is my management philosophy. I suppose I'm interested in those, you know, those videos and those self-help guides to managers, leadership skills, those kinds of things. I quite enjoy those, not because I think they've got any content necessarily, but I just like the form of them, you know. So I think if I was going to make one of those, how would I sum up my philosophy of management? And I think I've got it down to this. It's called the North, South, East, West managerial philosophy, or no shit, easy what? No shit, easy what? North, South, East, West. Let me tell you what that means. The N stands for no problem, because when you're a manager, there are no such thing as problems. This is my philosophy. There are no problems, and by that I don't mean you use euphemisms like challenge. You know, there are no problems, just challenges. No, that's crap. There's no problems, there's no challenges. There's things to be done. There are things to be done, and ideally those things are done with care and passion and drive and because you want to do them. But if you can't get that, then do them out of duty, responsibility, because you kind of get paid for them, because you take pride in your work, because that's the kind of person you are. Yeah, just do the stuff. but there is no problem. That's the first thing. Because I hate working in climates of problem, really. I think it's bad. No problem. S, South, stands for shit, which features in the sentence, the shit stops here. Because when you're in kind of middle management, there's a lot of shit that you come across in the upper echelons. You know, higher managers only get to be higher managers because they're good at dishing shit around, really. That's kind of how you get there. So there's lots of shit flies around at the upper levels of management. But if you're kind of middling and you're dealing with people further down the pecking order, if you're line managing, don't pass the shit downwards. That's my philosophy. Just, if you can, bat it back upstairs, or sidestep it, or let yourself get covered in it and take a shower when you get home, but don't pass the shit downwards. That's point 2. North, south. East. East, easy. E stands for easy. When you're the manager, everything is easy. By that I don't mean you're arrogant or you're showing off. It just means that you can never be tired, at least to the people beneath you. You can never be tired, you can never be ill, you can never be stressed, you can never be angry. Because you're not the person like that. You find one of my colleagues described this as going through work like a swan. You know what I mean? You have to appear to be so at home in this work and so in control and so on top of what's going on that you just sail through it like a swan. You know, it's easy. If you do, you know, suffer those things, and of course you should, you know, you should be, as a human being, of course you're bound to get angry and stressed. Don't talk to the people you're managing about that. Tell somebody who's on the same management level as yourself, take it home and take it out on the wife and kids. Go and see a counsellor or a therapist or a doctor or a priest, but don't complain to the people beneath you in the pecking order. Everything is easy. And the last one is west. What? What? When people come to see you and they've got a problem, remember, you don't acknowledge problems, but when people come to see you with what they identify as a problem, or they've made a mistake, or they're worried about something, or they haven't done their job properly, or they've, you know, somebody's, you know, there's some firefighting needs to be done. Whenever somebody comes to you, 99% of the time, the right thing to say is, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? If there is any blame to be allocated, don't allocate the blame then. If there's any disciplinary action to take, don't take the disciplinary action then. The only thing that needs to happen at that point is find out what you can do to help. Leave the blame and disciplinary action till later. Quite often you don't even need to do it then, quite frankly. So that's it really, that's my philosophy. 16 years in middling management and that's all I've got out of it. North, south, east, west. No shit, easy. What? Yeah. I think I should make one of those videos, you know, those high production value videos where I come across like really snappy and I've got terribly nice teeth. I don't have terribly nice teeth in real life, but I could probably Photoshop my teeth so I come across like what's that guy called? Tony Robbins, who does the motivational videos. Tony Robbins, I can imagine him doing it. He's got one of those microphones like Madonna wears. I can imagine him striding around this stage with his big teeth and his massive jaw, going north, south, east, west. I'm just thinking about this idea that I talked about in a recent video to do with how a system might be developed that bypasses, in this case, YouTube's censorious practices, or just the fragility of any system in which videos, for example, are hosted on one particular site owned by one particular corporation. And you know, what kind of a system would you put in place where that fragility, that weakness didn't exist? And what I was suggesting there is that that rather than that each video, rather than it being associated with a particular place, it's given a unique identifier, and so that you know, when you want to find a video, you don't go to a place. You don't. Well, you kind of do go to a place, but you don't necessarily go to a place. You just there's a way of finding the video wherever it is. You know what I mean? So if it goes down in one place, it's still easily available somewhere else. And I think the way you have to do this, and this is picking up on something that somebody called Misc Skies, I think you're called. MISCSKIES is the spelling of the username, Misc Skies. I think that you suggested. I like that username, by the way. When I see that name, and I've seen it a few times, obviously, I imagine it's part of God's filing system. You know, he's got this filing system upstairs somewhere, and he's got a lot of skies, and some of them are like, he's got a box with sunsets in, he's got a box with cloudy, overcast, rainy days, he's got a box with clear, you know, Hawaii skies, whatever, and then he's got a bunch of stuff that doesn't really fit into those categories. You know, a bit cloudy with some contrails, smoky sky from the fire, you know, with some birds flying across it, that kind of weird shit. And so he puts all those skies in a box of miscellaneous skies, and it's got written on the outside in felt tip pen, Misc Skies. And maybe that's exactly the image you had when you chose that username. Anyway, what you suggested, Misc Skies, was what you pointed me to was magnet URIs, which I was very grateful, so I was able to look for that. And magnet URIs being the unique identifier that files are given, or were given at least, when for use by file sharing and torrent programs. It's the thing that allows the torrent program, or the yeah, I guess that would be it, or the peer-to-peer program, to identify the particular song or particular piece of music, particular document, wherever it is, you know, across a number of different places, which is exactly the kind of thing you want, isn't it, really? Although obviously peer-to-peer has some other kinds of problems. But you would definitely want to embed that kind of information into a video if you wanted to make it slightly more bulletproof. But you'd also need to make it transparent, I think. I guess what I'm imagining, because, you know, even torrents are too complex for most of us to be bothered with, really. The advantage of something like YouTube or Vimeo or Blip or whatever is that they're piss easy, aren't they? You know what I mean? You just upload a video, you click on a thumbnail of it and up it comes. It's all so simple, really, and you would have to keep it that simple or make it even simpler. So what I'm imagining is something like the equivalent of an embed code. Like if you want to put a video on your website, yeah, you just use the embed code. I'm thinking of something like the embed code, but instead of the embed code featuring the unique address, it features a search term linked to a unique identifier, a bit like a Googlewhack. No, Googlewhack is, well, I won't bore you with that, look it up. But yeah, so the embed code contains a Googlewhack to your unique identifier. So it all looks exactly the same, and the appearance on the website, on your site, when you embed this thing, looks exactly the same. You know, there it is, it's just the video is presented. But what's happening behind the scenes is there's a search going on for this unique identifier across a whole range of different sites, including personally owned sites, all that kind of stuff. And if it doesn't find it in one place because it's been taken down, for example, it'll just move on to the next place and bring the next iteration of it up. Because I always send mine to Blip, and from there they go syndicated to iTunes, the Internet Archive, YouTube, of course. And then as kind of media streams to places like VodPod. Just because I like that redundancy, but at the moment that redundancy isn't being used, you know what I mean? The fact that it's dead easy to put the same video in a number of different places, and memory's practically free, so I don't think you really use no extra resources to speak of. You know, that redundancy is there just as a backup right now, but I think it could be part of a system. If there was a way of, as I say, uniquely identifying these different iterations as examples of the same file, and then drawing on those iterations as part of a seamless experience within a website. Does that make sense? Yeah. Piro, you're good with coding. You've talked about coding recently. You should write that. Write that. Make loads of cash out of it. Throw some my way. Somebody should do it. Somebody should do it. I mean, it would be prone to abuse, that's the only thing. That's because in the same way that P2P and torrents are prone to abuse, you know. I mean, don't get me started on the copyright thing, but certainly bulletproof systems are always you know, it would be bulletproof for everyone. So you would have to build, I guess, a different kind of policing system into it on the back of it, you know, to make sure people weren't doing child porn or ultraviolet material or, you know, whatever. It's just illegal material, really. I guess you'd have to do something like that. My car's running great now. I say that because when I drove back up here last Friday, back up to Cheshire, it was running on 3 cylinders the whole time, occasionally dropping to 2 cylinders. So that was a bit worrying, actually. I think it got wet, you know, it's had a bit of rain on Friday, so I think it just got wet. So I thought, is it going to start this morning when I got in it? I parked it on a hill just in case, you know, so I could bump start it if it didn't start on the ignition. It started fine, and it's running fantastic on 4 cylinders. Go figure. I'm about 15 miles north of Bristol now. There's a service that's coming up I usually pull into, but I'm not going to today. But I'm thinking about this video I made recently, which I uploaded just this morning actually, about which is me dancing with no clothes on. And I made a video a couple of days ago when I was talking about the possibility that I might do it. And a user called Wim Sweden, is it pronounced Wim or Vim? Anyway, Wim Sweden, who I think won a competition I set a year ago. That was you, wasn't it? The competition about the Florida map. Anyhow, I think it was you, Wim Sweden. That's his comment saying, why don't you just show parts of the video I'm critiquing, which is this Anne Liv Young video. Why don't you just show some of that and critique it, rather than kind of do this fairly complex reenactment of it or something. I could do that, you know, in a sense I do that sometimes in my job, you know, I work in theatre, and certainly sometimes in the past, not so much right now, when I used to run performance studies classes, that kind of thing. That's exactly the kind of thing you would do, you know, you would show a piece of a performance or a piece of film or whatever it might be, and then you would analyse it with students, you know, you would go through it in various different ways, run different kinds of analytical models through it to help them understand it, I guess. That's kind of the purpose of it, help them to work with it a bit more fully. So yeah, I could do that, but I don't know, I'm resistant to that sometimes. I mean, I can see the value of it in some ways, obviously, otherwise I wouldn't do it. But in other ways, I'm quite resistant to it. And also, I don't like stepping outside the medium. And I suppose that's what it is, really, isn't it? You know, in order to analyse something in the way that I'm talking about here, you know, where you show the thing, or you go and see the theatre piece, or you look at the artwork, and then you talk about it in this analytical way, you have to step outside of the medium to do it. And I'm interested in seeing what happens when you stay inside the medium. You know, you're still thinking about things, and you're still engaging, but you're still engaging within the media. That's kind of something that's more interesting to me. So I think there are, as I say, there are some definite advantages to stepping outside and doing the analytical thing, the detached analytical approach, academic approach. But there are some disadvantages, I think. I probably shouldn't tell my students this. Oh well, maybe I will, I don't know. I mean, first off, obviously, it's always incomplete when you do this analytical detached approach. When you step outside the medium and say, this is the work we're going to look at, and we're going to look at it through these theories, there's always a lot of stuff missing. You know, there's always implicit, experiential, phenomenological stuff going on in the piece itself, the work itself, that you can't capture in other kinds of language. You know, you can't exhaust the piece by talking about it. So there's always something missing there. You know, it's a bit like consciousness. So this probably sounds like a tangent, and it is, but you know, when you talk about consciousness, you never, at least I don't, I think I'm speaking for a lot of people here, you never feel like you're actually got the thing you're talking about, you know? Like there's something evading your descriptive powers. And I think it's because you're outside of the medium, you know, you have to be in consciousness to get the consciousness. If you step outside of it and try to talk about it in analytical terms, you always miss bits out. I guess that's all I'm saying there, really. And the same thing is true with talking about other stuff. You know, we talk about film. If you do film analysis, it's interesting, but the film is always doing something else. So that's the first thing. It's incompleteness. And secondly, it's something to do with a kind of recuperation of the thing. Now, I have this experience with some of my students, particularly first-year students, what I tend to do is I tend to show them a piece of work relatively early on. It's a piece of theatre work. I'm not going to bore you with the details of it, but I show them a piece of theatre work, usually on video, and it's usually quite a challenging piece. I show them pieces that they'll be familiar with, so they've got some grounding. And at a certain point, I'll show them a piece that's going to challenge their expectations and their preconceptions. And this particular piece I'm thinking of, it's quite long. It's about 90 minutes. It's got lots of repetition in it. It's got long stretches of tediousness, quite frankly. There's no clear characters that you would normally get in a play. There's not a story that they might hook onto. So they don't have a lot of purchase on it, you know what I mean? And they tend to come out of that, a lot of the students come out of that experience really angry or frustrated or bored. You know, all kinds of emotional responses to it. And then I usually spend a couple of days after that running various analytical models through it, simple ones because they're first year students, but analysing this piece. You know, have we thought about it in this way? Let's look at this particular essay by this famous person and see if we can apply these ideas to this experience. And usually by the end of that, they're okay with it. You know, they're okay with it. They're all right, I get it now. I understand what's going on now. Which is great in one way because you've added to their understanding. But in another way, I always think, well, what happened to that anger? You know, what happened to that boredom? What happened to that sense of frustration? You know, I don't really want to kill people's those kind of relationships, you know what I mean? And recuperating a piece by carefully framing it academically in a theoretical context and allowing people to understand it, whatever that means, can I think do that? And that's part of this detached thing, isn't it? You know, you detach from the work, you lasso it and corral it in theoretical language and analytical frameworks, and then it becomes kind of safe, you know, and it can't bore you anymore, and it can't anger you anymore, can't challenge you anymore. It's just become part of the background noise of your life. So yeah, that's one of the reasons, again, why I'm a little bit resistant sometimes, not always, a little bit resistant to the cool, calm and collected, this is art, now this is me talking about art. I suppose a third reason, if I needed a third reason, is that it tends to elevate the academic over the experiential. Do you know what I mean? Like, it makes the thing you're talking about, the film or the artwork or the show, whatever it is, or the YouTube video, it tends to make that work kind of subsidiary to the act of talking about it. As if this thing is just an excuse for me to talk about these clever ideas that I know about. You know what I mean? So I'm always a bit reluctant to that. It's almost as if I don't know, it just feels a bit parasitic. And again, I'm uncomfortable with that. So wherever possible, I try to stay in the medium and not either elevate myself outside of it and kind of talk about it as if it's some lesser species that can't talk for itself, or whatever. You know, I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm up to with that, really. Although I can see the value of analysis at times, don't get me wrong. But that's the reason why Vim, Sweden, I didn't do that. Actually, I felt a bit reluctant, because when I did this video of me dancing with no clothes on a coffee table, I did write a long blurb underneath it, which is exactly that kind of academic framing. But I did that specifically because I'm entering it for a competition. It's one of those, you do it for real and you're doing it for a joke at the same time things. But yeah, I did write the couple of hundred words, framing it a little bit. So I don't know how I feel about that. Anyway, yeah, that's that. Thank you. Bristol. I was watching one of Piro's videos yesterday, your videos, Piro, called something like "You Are What Got You Here" or something like that. I think that's what it was, something like that. And it's, to me, I felt like a follow-up to that video you made a few days ago about being a wave. You know, the fact that we as human beings are not. Oh God, what am I trying to say? We're not the material out of which we're made. That doesn't make any sense, you know, any more than a piece of music is the piece of vinyl onto which it's pressed or whatever. We're not that, or a wave in the ocean is not the water molecules that make it up. It's the pattern that persists over time and through which different kinds of water molecules or different media will pass, you know what I mean? Is that right? I think that's what you were saying anyway. Yeah, that it's a pattern of information, I guess. And this thing about you are what brought you here seems to be about that. You know, you're clearly not the meat that's on your bones, and you're not your bones. You are a kind of standing wave in the flow of meat that goes through you, in the flow of molecules that we're all immersed. And the particular flow of molecules, that particular standing wave, which is an instantiation of a person, has a history. So it's not perfectly static. You know, it is the information, the pattern of information changes over time and acquires subroutines and different patterns within patterns. And that's what I think you're saying is who you are, the thing that brought you here, the history. It's kind of history, yeah? You are your history. Which I can kind of understand what you mean. I'll reject that out of hand now, I have to say. I think I'm just going to reject that. Partly because I just don't like it. I don't like the idea, because it feels like history is determinacy, you know, it feels that kind of way. Which does make sense in every kind of causal way that you can imagine. And as you know, because we've talked about this before, Piro, I do have determinist leanings. So I do see causality, and I do as being absolutely built into the being of human as well as everything else. And in that sense, history is, you know, everything really. We are the products of our history, just like whether a snooker ball goes in the hole or not is a result of the history of its motion across the table and the history of its being struck by the stick, you know. So yeah, I can relate to it in that ground. But on the other hand, I guess I just don't like it, which is no reason not to agree with it. But I do think it's possible to reject it, whether you like it, even if you do like it. You know, I think there's a mental exercise you can go through to reject it. I don't know whether it has any bearing on the reality of it, but I think it certainly works for me to think that thought. I am not the thing that brought me here. You know, I'm not a product of my history. If I suddenly found out tomorrow that I was adopted, and that woman that I call my mother is actually not my mother at all, you know, my history would change dramatically. But that wouldn't negate the last, 50 years of my life, would it really? It wouldn't say that. I don't know. I think you get what I'm going at there. I suppose where I'm going with this is, to what extent can anything be said to be the thing that is who we are? And this is an exercise that I really enjoy doing for myself, actually, which I found quite empowering, and is probably the kind of thing that Biodegradebleman would find magical and mystical, which is a kind of reductive process. Okay, I'm not the meat that hangs off my bones, I'm not that. I think we're all agreed on that. I'm also not, I would suggest, I am also not the thing that brought me here. I am not my history. I'm certainly not reducible to that, I don't think. I'm also not just my desires, you know what I mean? I'm not reducible to the things that I want and need and have desire for. And I know that because I can curtail many of those desires, and I don't disappear when I do that. Nor are my possessions. As I know, I can give things away, I can lose things, I can acquire different things, and nothing substantially changes in me when I do that. I'm not my potential even, because I know my potential can be thwarted or it can be enhanced, and different things can happen to that, just at apparently the whims of fate. And so I'm not my potential, and I'm not my biology. I'm not what I know, because I can learn new things and I can forget old things. So I'm not that either. So all these things that I might choose to think of as myself, I look at and I think, no, that's not me, that's not me, that's not me. Now there's two ways you could go with that, I think, from that position. And as I say, this is just a kind of mental hygiene that I'm running through myself. There's two positions you can go with that. One is you can go towards an essentialism. you can say, well, no, I'm none of those things. I am something else, which is the real me, you know, like a soul or a spirit or whatever, or some secular or quasi-scientific version of that. You could make those kind of things. But that's not where I would go with it. I would just get to that point and think, oh, well, I'm none of those things. I'm not, you know, I'm an artifact of those things, but I'm not those things. And I don't really feel the need to look elsewhere for anything else. You know what I mean? Once you've looked in all the likely places, then the only place left, however unlikely, is where the thing is. And if the only place left is nowhere, which I think is where I'm at with that, then I'm not really anywhere. I'm not in the things that brought me here or any of those other things I've mentioned. I'm just not there at all, really. And I find that really empowering and curiously. I mean, I appear in my language as I'm speaking, and when I look, like when you open the fridge door, the light, there it is, the light's on. You know, every time I look for myself, there I am. But I don't think I am really. And as I say, I found that empowering. It makes me feel much more kind of disposable to myself, and I can take myself a lot more lightly if I don't have this kind of precious cargo of essential selfness to look after the whole damn time. You know what I mean? I can feel much more ephemeral about all that. That's just me, though. You know, people might feel very differently about that. Did I turn it off? Can't tell. No, the light's still on. How do you feel about that biodegradable man? Too magical? Who are you? What's yourself? This is just an addendum to a video I made about 150 miles back, where I was talking about this north, south, east, west thing. You know, it's a kind of managerial philosophy. No problem, the shit stops here, everything is easy, and what can I do to help? I was just thinking of an alternative to the S, the shit stops here, which is say sorry. Say sorry. Because I think as a manager, when you're dealing with someone who's further down the pecking order than you are, it's always good to say sorry, even if whatever the thing is that's arising is nothing to do with you, even if it's not your fault. You know what I mean? Because if you are in a position of any kind of power, even if it's only a tiny bit of managerial authority, then you know, you've already got the upper hand. You know, you're already in a position of dominance, and saying sorry can never, you know, is a kind of lowering, isn't it? You know what I mean? If you're going to talk to people, you have to try to make sure that they're as level as possible. So expecting somebody beneath you to apologise is never a good idea. But yeah, taking it upon yourself to apologise and say sorry is always really handy, I think. You know, so if the shit hits the fan and something really difficult takes place, not a problem. No, there are no problems. Just saying sorry to people is really useful, I think. Anyway, tell me if you're interested in this sort of stuff. Tell me, do you think it's better to have it as shit or as sorry? Yeah. Approaching Exeter, and I've got, as you can see, I've got an earphone in, and I'm listening to an MP3 of a video by dospook. He made this hour-long video. He's thinking about vegetarianism, so I'm just pressed to play, and I'm listening to it now. He's saying this: approach things in a significantly different than conference report approaches them, or Gary, or anybody else. As far as I can tell, kind of wanted to, I guess, just kind of jump in with a few ideas about this, kind of okay, for me personally, being vegetarian without cheating, without gone ahead and been vegetarian and enjoyed your milk and cheese and honey and all the things that define vegetarianism but don't define veganism. and living that way for several years of my adult life. Okay, I'm not going to go on with this. But he's still talking, and I'll listen to it, and I don't know, maybe I'll find something to respond to. Got to talk to the A30 now. Still listening to dospook, and he's just asking me now about at what level of sentience kicks in. How small does your animal have to become, or what has to be absent? Yeah, absent senses. It's talking about at what level does sentience kick in, whether it becomes a moral problem or a moral question about whether feeling and suffering can be talked about. At what level do... shorter sentences, man, come on. You keep saying if this is the question, then it's like 15 minutes. He's basically saying at what level does the ethical question kick in? I don't think there is a level, or there's not a clear demarcation, there's a fuzzy boundary. I'm absolutely sure that plants, anything without a central nervous system doesn't have it for sure. Plants, you can do what you like with them, torture them, stick needles in them, set fire to them. Waterboard cabbages, no problem. We know that for sure. And I would say anything below a bird, anything above a bird for sure can feel pain. Between birds and, let's see, yeast, somewhere between yeast and birds, there is a gradation. And I don't know where it lies. That's a research topic. Do I pick up worms to reduce suffering? No, but I do occasionally if I see a beetle walking across a road and I think that is never going to make it to the side. I do occasionally pick it up and turn it around. I'll come back to that later. Still listening to dospook. He's just been talking about animal experimentation and the fact that we all in some way or other, whether however vegetarian or members of PETA we are or whatever, we all owe some of our civilization to the fact that science has exploited animals for experimentation purposes for decades, if not centuries. And of course that's absolutely correct. But I would say not only has science done that, but evolution itself is a process of ongoing animal experimentation involving massive culls of not just individual animals, but whole species, whole communities of animals, and has for millions of years. I mean, the whole history of ourselves, our being here, to return to the we are our history, we are what brought us here. What brought us here is a massive experiment on sentient animals from day one, really. So dospook, you're now talking about the secret life of plants, not the Stevie Wonder album, the test in the 70s, which captured a lot of people's imagination, this idea that plants can feel and have emotions. Sorry, that is so bogus. It really is bogus. The plants do not scream in the fields. There are no pain receptors, there's no nociceptors, there is no neurons, there is nothing to feel pain. There is undoubtedly response, but response does not mean pain. Response does not mean sentience. It just doesn't. Sorry. You're saying there's a gradient into plant life. There isn't really. I don't think there's a gradient in plant life in terms of the ethics around the consumption of sentient or feeling entities. There is undoubtedly a gradient, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. But once you've got to plant, you're well past the bottom end of that gradient. It's somewhere in the entities with central nervous systems area, somewhere in there. You're just talking about life-consuming life as that, as life-consuming life, that version of cannibalism, which I guess is Gary's poetic use of the term. That's not the one that I would use. But yeah, life consumes life, but life is just the word for a set of overlapping systems. We call it life as if it's one thing, but it's not. Lots of the processes that happen in living beings also happen outside of living beings, in terms of information processing, in terms of metabolic process, in terms of fluid process, in terms of physical processes. But when those all coalesce into these little sacks of skin that we have, we call them life. Or indeed, when they've got DNA involved, we call them life. But that doesn't mean that all life is exactly the same and needs to be equally treated. We have to recognise what processes are going on in those entities actually regardless of whether they're in stacks of skin or not, if we could ever identify processes corresponding to pain within silicon constructions, then we'd have an ethical and moral obligation to consider that. So you're right about gradient, but I think taking that down to plant is really misguided, sorry. You talk about rationality again now, and this is, I've got a slightly tangential thing to say about that, because I share some of your views about rationality and some others, and some of the aspects of it I don't share, because you're talking about rationality as being held up as a very particular idea, which has a clearly defined set of properties around it, that you can be centrist about it. I think it's the phrase you used earlier. But for me, I'm just etymologically considering rationality, because I think I'm right in saying that rationality comes from ratio, meaning to measure, I think. And you're talking earlier about meditation, which also comes from a phrase meaning to measure. And I think there's an unexploited relationship to be thought about there, to do with what constitutes measurement and what process of measurement, you know, that monkey see, monkey do processes, uniform lockstep. This is where I feel like I'm ostracised, or self-ostracizing, if I suggest that a lot of people who are going to maintain civil discourse and dialogues, and they're going to kind of like, you know, Gary catches a lot of shit for swearing, his psychological approach towards argumentation, whereas other people would draw the line and say that's not civil, or they would say that, you know, what kind of psychological pains is being endured here, and so it goes on. Yeah, something to do with meditation and rationality and identification. Identification is something like holding two rulers up against one another and comparing their length or something. Some people like to throw out obscure ideas. You're talking about firewalking and schools of thought and right-mindedness and pain and some reference where I mentioned putting hand into a fire and the rational thing, the right-minded thing to do for biology to oppose that. Pain is fine as long as it's consensual. Violence is fine as long as it's consensual. The scene in Goodwill Hunting is consensual violence. Firewalking is consensual pain. Sacrifice is consensual pain. There's that scene in I, Robot where Will Smith hates robots, and he hates robots, and the only ground we can really share is the physical ground. And Will Smith hates robots because he had this episode where he was in a car accident, and apparently none of us have tickets, and there's a car accident, and his car goes in the water, and this car is filling up with water, he's drowning, but somewhere there's a woman, I think, who was also in the crash, and when there's a disagreement on the floor they actually get into a fist fight about it, and the woman is drowning, and the robot dives in the water, and he smashes the window to save Will Smith, and Will Smith say, no, don't save me, save the woman. But the robot, who is rational, has carried out a kind of noting uniformity, has carried out a kind of optimization exercise, a utilitarian, rational evaluation of the situation, and knows that the right thing to do is to save, the right-minded thing to do is to save Will Smith. Will Smith, who is not in his right mind, would prefer to sacrifice his life in order that this other woman might have a chance of living, even if that chance is far below his, and maybe even if she's already dead. And there's different words for considerations in different languages. And that's the iRobot thing, isn't it? Because the robot is following the Asimov's laws of robotics, as opposed to the irrational laws of how rooted is that care. Not mythological. I want to go so far as to, because I'm getting off my topic. Dospook is here. Okay, now you're talking about ethical approaches to the slaughter of animals, whether it's better to anaesthetize an animal, drag it away from the herd carefully before you slit its throat or before you kill it, or whether you should just move it a short distance away and then do that thing that that guy uses in No Country for Old Men, you know, it just shoots a bolt to the brain really quickly. Well, you know, which is the most ethical thing to do? Should we soften the process up and make it more user-friendly? Because I don't think there'll be anything to do with the the animal welfare. It's really to do with making the industry look as if it's got a lot of welfare attached to it. I think it's really significant. One of the best designers of, the most famous designers of slaughterhouses is autistic. This is, I can't remember her name now. I can't remember her name because you're talking in my ear and it's distracting me. I feel like Harrison Bergeron. You know, it's just thoughts are constantly being interrupted by something else. So people maintain this idea, the ideology of lack of suffering. And then you get a whole lot of philosophies that define life as suffering. So anyway, I'm thinking about this. I'm trying to get this person's name. She designs slaughterhouses, but she's quite a high operating autistic. But she does do the mind-blind thing. She described her family while sitting down for a meal with her family as being surrounded by sacks of skin draped over chairs. There's clearly, she seems like a perfectly nice person, but she clearly has a deep lack of empathy. And that lack of empathy allows her to treat animals as machines that behave in certain ways under certain circumstances, particularly behave in a way which is irritating for the farmer or the slaughterhouse owners. Animals kill other animals like humans used to kill animals. So yeah, we shouldn't pretty it up just because it makes it more acceptable to us. It's too easily ignored. They're fine. Look how prettily painted that slaughterhouse is. Look. The animals don't even know they're going to die. It's fine. It's fine. We can just waterboard these prisoners because we're going to erase that part of their memory later. They won't remember anyway. The history that got them here, their self, that is the history of what got them here, won't contain that bit where they got waterboarded and were really scared and in pain. So it doesn't matter. These animals won't know anything about the dying and the pain, so it doesn't matter. Outside of agreement in their own thoughts. Either they're so afraid to say something that's outside of possible agreement. Little tiny sword. They would lose a sense of sanity. We speak differently than other generations. We speak generally differently to other cultures. We speak different to other people. We adhere to different things, different denominations of give itself over to a structure. The structure is basis for our understanding rationality. Rationality is embedded into our normativity. History of enlightenment. It's about 1600. History of the word sentience. Around 7th time. You said to be sporadically. Until recent arguments doing that which is right. Different to arguments doing that which is suffering. But there's definite no point listening to Gary. His argument. That which is right. Vegetarianism is right. Vegetarianism says it's vegetarianism because it reduces suffering. Now he says that it reduces suffering. If it's right, then notice that combination. I'm not trying to make a tricky against what he's saying, outlining this, right? And some of it I guess goes. Try and make more robust the thoughts I'm having about these things. Yeah, I guess I've covered everything really. Comparative ethics with rape. Just want to consider whether or not you want anesthesia. The notion of whether or not rape is right. If you substitute these two words of eating meat with rape, you will find that comparative ethic, if you want to maintain a comparative ethic, we're going to remember, I think most people will try to argue for omnivore, carnivore, in terms of suffering arguments. Or you can put an age of consent, substitute slavery in there. Some people like to maintain a consistency in their argumentation and their comparative ethics, whereas other people do not. The cases, the notion of trying to align comparative ethics, malign comparative ethics is a uniformity of rationalization, meditation. People get caught in this idea. As I write this into conference report to make this comparative ethics between slavery and civilization, and yet partake very heavily in justifying his, this is my inclusiveness in driving. Oh fuck, I'm driving! Shit! And the supplements don't work, they just make you worse, and I know I'll hear your name again. No, I'll see you're not killing plants. If you support or draw a line where that makes any sense, it comes to a point where we are, watch this trick. Girl. There might not be any need to open the mouth anymore. We have the technology to interject food into our system through streaming IVs. We can piss through catheters constantly. There's no need for any historic traditions. A lot of tradition we can just strip away for some reason. The tradition of hunting and eating meat and that. Not even driving, and I feel like I missed my off-ramp. Annoy anybody out there who doesn't want to sit through it. As if it's all about you guys. Anyway. Still got about 20 seconds. Where do you notice your delimitings on different gradients? Go ahead and maybe write at 5 in terms of industry, animals, right and wrong, one's relationship to law, and one's relationship to sentience or something. Why 5? Why not 6? Why not 10? Why not none? Why not I've just been listening to dospook's video on MP3. I've just finished it, and I'm just thinking about how you respond to various videos, or I respond to various videos. And the way I characterise it for myself, and this is just a personal thing, I'm not saying there's any value beyond that, is in terms of different kinds of sports. That's how I kind of envisage it, really. You know, how we talk to each other on YouTube, or how these videos relate to one another. As I say, I use a kind of sporty metaphor, because sometimes it's like tennis, you know. You'll say something and pitch those words over to me, and I will kind of reshape them and think of a response to that, and then pitch that back, you know. And it's very kind of straightforward, call and response, back and forth. And I guess that's the default setting, and that's what YouTube is kind of set up to take on. But there are other things as well. I mean, I quite like it sometimes when it's like a relay race, you know, when someone will say something and I feel I can do something with that. So I'll pick it up and move it on a bit, and then just throw it out and see if someone else will pick it up and run with it a bit further. So it's not really a response, it's more like this baton passing thing, you know what I mean? At other times, I think it's more like, I'm not even sure this is a sport actually, geocaching. You know geocaching? That's when you get some object and you put it in a tin box and then you hide it miles from nowhere. But you put the GPS settings of where this geocache is, where this object is, on some websites that do this geocaching thing. And if you're into the sport, you will go to that place and try to find the hidden treasure and see what's there, and then leave something of your own, you know. And sometimes I think what we're doing here is a bit like geocaching. You know, I'll say something and just I'll leave it, and at some point someone will come across it, not too long afterwards I would hope, and you know, take something from it and perhaps leave something else ready for somebody else to find. It should be something quite different in many ways. So sometimes it's a bit like that. There's probably other sports I should think of actually, but yeah, it's kind of like that really. Yeah, so I'm not sure response captures the variations in what kinds of things people can do in relation to one another. It would be a shame if the only thing we thought we could do in relation to one another's work here, or play here, is bat the thing back, you know. Bat it to your side of the screen. Take that. There you go, look. New key. Okay, this is my last little add-on to this managerial corporate wonk address that I would be giving if I was Tony Robbins, you know, the motivational speaker. North, south, east, west. No shit, easy. What? I would do one more bit, and this is about information and evidence. There's a saying in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, which is that everything is information, by which that anything that happens to you, you know what I mean, it's just a way of kind of reframing experience. Everything that happens to you as an experience is information. That's how you have to treat it. So if something happens which is negative, you treat it as information that you're learning from. Yeah, that's the idea of it. But in management terms, I would reframe that as gather information, not evidence. That would be the aphorism I would put it in. It's really tempting, not just in management actually, in life generally, at least this is something I find tempting, is rather than like gathering information from the world, or treating my experience of information that I can repurpose, you know, to function more compassionately or effectively or aesthetically more interesting or whatever, you know what I mean. Instead of taking it as information, I often find myself gathering evidence about the world, as either to confirm me in my suspicions that the world is shit, or to confirm my suspicions that everybody else is shit apart from me, or confirm me in my, you know, whatever, you know what I mean, to try some kind of, prosecute some kind of crime or criminal, or to demonstrate the truth statement of some case that I'm making. And that's not the same thing. That's a really different approach. And I think in management terms, that's really important. It's really tempting, you know, when you're at levels of management that I've been at, which is relatively low down, to particularly if you're prone to panic and worry, as all of us are from time to time, to see what's happening and gather evidence, you know, as a supporting story for the trial that is bound to erupt at any moment, in which you will be found potentially prosecuted. But rather than do that, you know, to resist the temptation to gather evidence and try instead to gather information, that is much healthier, I think. And not just in management terms, actually. I think that's just a life thing, really, isn't it? Gather information, not evidence. I think I might get a t-shirt with that, or a pair of pants. What do you think? A pair of pants with gather information, not evidence. No, it wouldn't work, would it? Forget that. Just dropping down into Truro now, so this is the end of the videos, because the wheel starts to get a bit seasicky again now. But look, the sun's come out. It was beautiful sunrise when I first set off 6 hours ago. And then most of this journey down has been through leaden, overcast skies. The colour of television tuned to a dead channel, as Gibson would say. And now here I am in sunny Cornwall, approaching Truro, and the sun is out. Isn't that great?